In a small, peaceful town surrounded by lush green hills and winding rivers, there lived a woman named Maria Rodriguez. Maria was known for her warm smile and kind heart. She had spent most of her life raising her only son, Daniel, who was the light of her world. From the moment he was born, Maria dedicated herself to giving him the best life possible. Her days were filled with laughter as she watched Daniel grow into a bright, compassionate young man. Daniel was unlike any other child in their neighborhood. Even as a little boy, he showed an unusual love for nature. While other kids played video games or chased each other around the park, Daniel would sit quietly under the old oak tree in their backyard, sketching birds or examining leaves. He often asked his mother questions about how trees grew, why flowers bloomed, and what made rain fall from the sky. Maria didn't always have the answers, but she loved seeing the sparkle of curiosity in his eyes. As Daniel grew older, his passion for nature only deepened. By the time he reached high school, he was already leading campaigns to clean up local parks and organize recycling drives in their community. His teachers admired his determination, and his classmates looked up to him. But it wasn't just about earning praise. Daniel genuinely cared about making the world a better place. "The earth is like our home," he once told Maria. "If we don't take care of it, who will?" After finishing college, Daniel decided to pursue a career as an environmental activist. He joined a nonprofit organization that worked tirelessly to protect forests and wildlife. His job took him all over the region, speaking at schools, organizing protests, and meeting with government officials to advocate for stricter environmental laws. Though Maria missed having him at home, she couldn't have been prouder of the person he had become. Every time he called her after a long day, she could hear the excitement in his voice. He truly believed he was making a difference. But life has a way of reminding us how fragile it can be. One rainy evening, tragedy struck when Maria received a phone call that shattered her world. The voice on the other end belonged to a police officer, delivering news no parent should ever have to hear. Daniel had been driving home late from a protest against illegal logging when his car skidded off a slippery road. Despite the efforts of emergency responders, he didn't survive the accident. For Maria, the days that followed felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The house, which had once been filled with Daniel's laughter and energy, now seemed eerily silent. Everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of him. The drawings he'd made as a child pinned to the fridge, the hiking boots he left by the door, the books on conservation stacked neatly on his desk. Each memory brought both comfort and unbearable pain. Friends and family did their best to support Maria during this difficult time. They visited her daily, bringing food, offering hugs, and sharing stories about Daniel. Some recalled how he used to help elderly neighbors carry groceries, while others remembered his infectious enthusiasm during community events. Though their words were meant to console her, Maria couldn't bring herself to feel anything but emptiness. How could she go on without her son? How could the world keep spinning when such a bright light had been extinguished? As the initial shock began to wear off, practical matters demanded attention. Arrangements had to be made for Daniel's funeral, and Maria found herself overwhelmed by decisions she never imagined she'd have to make. What kind of flowers should adorn the casket? Should they hold the service at the church or outdoors near the forest Daniel loved so much? Every choice felt heavy, as if adding another weight to her already burdened heart. Despite her grief, Maria wanted the funeral to reflect Daniel's spirit. She chose white roses because they symbolized purity and new beginnings, qualities that embodied her son perfectly. She also requested that attendees wear green instead of black, hoping to celebrate his life rather than mourn his passing. Flyers were distributed inviting people to plant a tree in Daniel's honor, continuing the legacy he had fought so hard to build. On the morning of the funeral, the weather matched Maria's mood. Dark clouds loomed overhead, casting a somber shadow over the town. As mourners gathered outside the church, whispers of sympathy floated through the air. Inside, the pews were packed with friends, relatives, colleagues, and even strangers whose lives Daniel had touched. At the front of the room stood the coffin, draped with the white roses Maria had selected. It gleamed faintly under the soft glow of candlelight, drawing everyone's gaze. Maria sat in the front row, clutching a tissue in trembling hands. Her mind raced with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to rush to the coffin and throw herself onto it, begging for one more moment with her son. Another part of her recoiled at the thought, unable to face the finality of saying goodbye. For now, she remained seated, staring blankly ahead as tears streamed down her cheeks. The priest began the ceremony with a heartfelt eulogy, recounting Daniel's achievements and describing the impact he had on those around him. Words like compassionate, selfless, and visionary echoed through the church, painting a picture of a life cut tragically short. Maria listened intently, nodding occasionally, as if to acknowledge the truth of what was being said. Yet beneath the surface she felt detached, as though she were watching someone else's story unfold. When the eulogy ended, it was time for the final farewell. One by one, mourners approached the coffin to pay their respects. Some placed flowers on top while others whispered prayers or simply bowed their heads in silence. Maria stayed rooted in her seat, frozen with fear and uncertainty. Looking inside the coffin felt like stepping into uncharted territory, a realm where reality and emotion collided in ways she wasn't ready to confront. But as the line of visitors dwindled and the church grew quieter, Maria knew she couldn't delay any longer. Summoning every ounce of courage she possessed, she rose to her feet and slowly walked toward the casket. Her legs felt like lead, each step heavier than the last. When she finally reached the edge, she hesitated, gripping the polished wood for support. Taking a deep breath, she leaned forward, bracing herself for the sight of her son's still form. As Maria leaned closer to the coffin, her heart pounded in her chest like a drumbeat. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, though she tried to block them out. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the casket, and for a brief moment, she wondered if she was making a mistake. Was she truly ready to see her son one last time? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but she knew she couldn't turn back now. This was her final chance to say goodbye. With great effort, Maria forced herself to look inside. But instead of finding Daniel lying peacefully within the satin-lined interior, something entirely unexpected greeted her. Nestled where his body should have been was a small, vibrant sapling, a delicate green shoot with tender leaves reaching upward toward the dim light of the church. It stood no taller than a foot, its roots cradled gently in soft soil. For a split second, Maria froze, unsure whether what she was seeing was real or some cruel trick played by her exhausted mind. Her first instinct was disbelief. How could this be possible? Where was Daniel? Panic bubbled up inside her as she stared at the tiny plant, searching for answers that wouldn't come. She blinked repeatedly, thinking perhaps her tear-filled eyes were deceiving her. But no matter how many times she looked away and then back again, the sapling remained exactly where it had been, a living, breathing thing occupying the space, meant for her son's lifeless form. Maria's breath hitched in her throat and she stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance. A few people nearby noticed her reaction and rushed to steady her. "Are you all right?" someone asked softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Maria nodded weakly, unable to speak. She wanted to point to the coffin and demand an explanation, but when she glanced around, she realized no one else seemed to find anything unusual about it. To them, the coffin appeared closed and untouched, just as it had throughout the service. Confusion swirled in Maria's mind like a storm. Was she hallucinating? Had grief driven her to imagine such a bizarre sight? Or was this something more? As irrational as it sounded, part of her refused to dismiss what she had seen. The sapling hadn't felt like a figment of her imagination. It had been too vivid, too real. Its leaves shimmered faintly under the candlelight, almost as if they were alive with energy. And there was something familiar about it, something that tugged at the edges of her memory, though she couldn't quite place it. The priest approached her then, concern etched across his face. "Maria," he said gently, "would you like a moment alone?" She shook her head, not trusting herself to respond. Instead, she turned her attention back to the coffin, hoping against hope that the mysterious plant might offer some kind of clue. But try as she might, She couldn't summon the courage to look inside again, not while so many others were watching. Instead, Maria focused on finishing the funeral rituals. She accepted condolences from friends and family, nodding mechanically, as they expressed their sympathies. Some shared stories about Daniel, recounting moments that made her smile through her tears. Others simply held her hand, offering silent support. Yet, despite their efforts, Maria couldn't shake the image of the sapling from her mind. It lingered there, stubborn and unyielding, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. After the service concluded, mourners began filing out of the church, heading toward the cemetery for the burial. Maria followed silently, her thoughts consumed by questions she couldn't answer. What did the sapling mean? Why had only she seen it, and most importantly, why had it appeared in Daniel's coffin of all places? These mysteries weighed heavily on her, overshadowing even her grief. At the gravesite, the same scene unfolded. When it came time to lower the coffin into the ground, Maria hesitated, glancing nervously at the wooden box. Would the sapling still be there? Should she check again? Fear stopped her from acting on her instincts, and she allowed the ceremony to proceed without interruption. As dirt was shoveled over the coffin, sealing it beneath layers of earth, Maria felt a strange mixture of relief and frustration. Relief, because the ordeal was finally over, but frustration because she still had no answers. That evening, after returning home, Maria sat alone in her living room, staring blankly at the wall. The house felt eerily quiet without Daniel's presence, and every corner seemed to echo with memories of him. Unable to sleep, she wandered outside to the backyard, seeking solace under the old oak tree where he used to spend hours reading or sketching. Moonlight filtered through the branches, casting silvery patterns on the grass below. And then it hit her. The realization struck like lightning, illuminating the darkness in her mind. The sapling wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It was Daniel. Somehow, impossibly, her son had transformed, or perhaps chosen to leave behind, a piece of himself in the form of that fragile little plant. The idea was absurd, bordering on impossible, yet it resonated deeply within her. After all, Daniel had spent his entire life fighting for nature, nurturing it, and believing in its power to heal and sustain. If anyone could defy the boundaries between life and death, it was him. Tears streamed down Maria's cheeks as she embraced this newfound understanding. Though she didn't fully comprehend how or why it had happened, she knew one thing for certain. The sapling wasn't just a symbol, it was a message. A message from Daniel, telling her not to give up, not to lose faith. He was still with her, in spirit if not in body, urging her to carry on the work they both cherished. With renewed determination, Maria resolved to honor her son's legacy. She would care for the sapling as if it were her own child, nurturing it with love and devotion. More than that, she vowed to continue the fight he had started, to protect the forests, preserve the earth, and inspire others to do the same. In that moment, standing beneath the moonlit sky, Maria found a glimmer of peace amidst her sorrow. Though Daniel was gone, his spirit lived on, not just in the sapling, but in every tree, every leaf, and every breath of fresh air. The days following the funeral passed in a blur for Maria, but one thing remained crystal clear in her mind: the image of the sapling nestled inside Daniel's coffin. Try as she might, she couldn't dismiss it as a figment of her imagination, or a trick of her grief-stricken mind. It had felt too real, too deliberate, and now, every time she closed her eyes, she saw those tiny green leaves reaching toward the light, as if trying to tell her something. Maria knew she couldn't leave the sapling behind at the gravesite. Whether it was truly Daniel's doing, or some inexplicable twist of fate, she felt an overwhelming responsibility to care for it. After much hesitation, and several sleepless nights, she decided to retrieve it from the cemetery. Early one morning, before anyone else was awake, she drove to the burial ground with a small shovel and a pot filled with fresh soil. Her heart raced as she approached the grave, half expecting someone to stop her or accuse her of desecrating sacred ground. But the cemetery was eerily quiet, save for the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Kneeling beside the freshly turned earth, Maria worked quickly, yet carefully, digging until she reached the coffin lid. When she finally opened it, the sapling was still there, just as vivid and alive as she remembered. Its presence brought both comfort and confusion. How could this fragile plant have survived being buried underground? Why hadn't it wilted or rotted away? These questions swirled in Maria's mind, but she didn't dwell on them for long. Instead, she gently lifted the sapling from its resting place, cradling it like a newborn baby, and carried it back home. Once safely inside her house, Maria planted the sapling in the backyard, near the base of the old oak tree where Daniel used to sit and read. She chose this spot deliberately, believing it held special significance for her son. As she patted the soil around the young plant, she whispered softly to it, "If you're really him, if you're really Daniel, please, give me a sign." The words felt foolish even as they left her lips, but she needed to say them, to believe that somehow, somewhere, her boy was still with her. Over the next few weeks, strange things began happening around the sapling. At first, Maria dismissed these occurrences as coincidences or tricks of her overactive imagination. But as they continued, she found it harder and harder to ignore them. For instance, birds started flocking to her yard in numbers far greater than usual. Sparrows, robins, and even rare species she'd never seen before perched on the branches of nearby trees, chirping melodies that sounded almost purposeful. Their songs seemed to harmonize perfectly, creating a symphony of sound that filled the air with warmth and life. One afternoon, while watering the sapling, Maria noticed something peculiar. The birds weren't just singing, they were gathering, specifically around the young plant, fluttering close as if drawn to it by some invisible force. Some even landed on its slender branches, their weight barely bending the delicate shoots. Watching this display, Maria felt a lump rise in her throat. Could it be that the animals sensed what she did, that this wasn't just any ordinary plant? But the oddities didn't stop there. Neighbors began reporting sightings of glowing lights hovering above Maria's garden late at night. One woman claimed she saw a soft golden glow emanating from the area where the sapling stood, illuminating the surrounding trees like a halo. Another neighbor swore he heard faint whispers coming from the direction of Maria's backyard, though when he went to investigate, all he found was silence. Maria herself never witnessed these phenomena, but the stories intrigued her. Were others picking up on something she couldn't see? Determined to uncover the truth, Maria turned to Daniel's belongings for answers. She spent hours going through his room, poring over journals, notebooks, and scraps of paper filled with his thoughts and ideas. What she discovered only deepened the mystery. In one journal entry dated months before his death, Daniel wrote passionately about the interconnectedness of all living things. "Trees are more than just plants," he had scrawled in messy handwriting. "They're guardians of our planet, keepers of memories, and bridges between worlds. If I can't finish my work, maybe nature will carry on for me." Reading those words sent chills down Maria's spine. Was the sapling a manifestation of Daniel's belief, a literal bridge between his world and hers? Or was it simply a metaphorical representation of his legacy? Either way, Maria couldn't deny the sense of purpose it gave her. Caring for the plant became her anchor, grounding her during moments when grief threatened to pull her under. She watered it daily, talked to it as if it were Daniel, and shielded it from harsh weather conditions. Each tender act felt like a step closer to understanding the enigma unfolding in her own backyard. As the sapling grew stronger, so did Maria's resolve. She began researching reforestation efforts and environmental conservation projects, inspired by Daniel's lifelong mission. She joined online forums, attended local meetings, and connected with other activists who shared her passion for protecting the earth. Through these interactions, she learned about innovative ways to combat deforestation and promote sustainable practices. Slowly but surely, she started channeling her sorrow into action, determined to honor Daniel's memory by continuing the work he loved. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Was she imagining all of this? Could a simple plant really hold such profound meaning? On particularly dark nights when loneliness pressed heavily against her chest, Maria questioned whether she was clinging to false hope. But then she would step outside and see the sapling standing tall, its leaves glistening with dew, and feel a renewed sense of faith. Whether or not the plant was truly Daniel, it represented everything he stood for: hope, resilience, and the enduring power of nature. Word of the mysterious sapling eventually spread throughout the community. Curious neighbors stopped by to catch a glimpse of the miracle tree, as some had begun calling it. Many left flowers or tokens of remembrance at its base, transforming the area into a makeshift shrine. Others confided in Maria, sharing stories of their own losses and struggles. They spoke of loved ones they missed, dreams they'd abandoned, and fears they couldn't shake. Listening to them, Maria realized that the sapling wasn't just helping her heal. It was bringing people together, creating a space for connection and healing. Despite the growing attention, Maria kept the true origin of the sapling a secret. She didn't want to burden others with the weight of her unanswered questions or risk being labeled as irrational. Instead, she let them draw their own conclusions, content to watch as the plant continued to thrive under her care. Every new leaf that unfurled felt like a victory. Every inch it grew a testament to Daniel's enduring spirit. By the end of the 3rd month, the sapling had transformed dramatically. What had once been a fragile shoot was now a sturdy young tree, its branches stretching skyward with confidence. Its roots dug deep into the soil, anchoring it firmly in place, as if determined to stay forever. Standing beside it one evening, Maria marveled at how much it had changed and how much it had changed her. Grief still lingered in her heart, but it no longer consumed her. In its place was a quiet strength, born from the knowledge that Daniel's legacy lived on, not just in the sapling, but in the lives he had touched and the causes he had championed. As twilight fell and the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Maria placed a hand on the tree's trunk. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. Whatever mysteries surrounded the sapling, one thing was certain: it had given her a reason to keep moving forward, and for now that was enough. As the months rolled on, Maria's life began to revolve around the sapling in ways she could never have anticipated. At first, caring for it had been an act of desperation, a way to hold on to Daniel and keep his memory alive. But as the plant grew stronger and more vibrant, it became something far greater, a source of inspiration, a symbol of hope, and even a bridge connecting her with others who shared her pain. The changes in the sapling were remarkable. What had once been a fragile shoot was now a sturdy young tree, standing tall and proud in the corner of Maria's backyard. Its branches spread wide, casting dappled shadows on the ground beneath it. The leaves shimmered in the sunlight, their green hue so vivid it almost seemed unnatural. Neighbors often remarked how quickly it had grown, marveling at its resilience despite harsh weather conditions and occasional pests. "It's like it has a will of its own," one elderly woman said during a casual visit, her eyes twinkling with wonder. Maria nodded silently, knowing deep down that the tree did have a will, Daniel's will. But what truly fascinated Maria weren't just the physical changes in the tree. It was the way it seemed to affect those around it. People continued to flock to her yard, drawn by word-of-mouth stories about the miracle sapling. Some came out of curiosity, while others arrived seeking solace. Many left feeling lighter, as though the presence of the tree had somehow eased their burdens. One afternoon, a young mother named Sarah approached Maria with tears streaming down her face. Her husband had recently passed away, leaving her to raise their 2 children alone. She confessed that seeing the sapling gave her strength, reminding her that life could grow even after loss. These encounters touched Maria deeply. For so long she had felt isolated in her grief, as if no one else could possibly understand what she was going through. Yet here were strangers, people she barely knew, sharing their own stories of heartbreak and healing. It dawned on her that Daniel's legacy wasn't just about saving trees or protecting the environment. It was about fostering connections and helping others find meaning in their struggles. And somehow the sapling had become a catalyst for all of this. Inspired by these interactions, Maria decided to take things a step further. She started hosting weekly gatherings in her backyard, inviting anyone interested to come and share their thoughts, memories, or simply sit quietly under the shade of the growing tree. She called them moments of reflection, hoping to create a safe space where people could open up without judgment. To her surprise, the idea caught on quickly. Friends, neighbors, and even acquaintances from town began showing up regularly, bringing chairs, snacks, and sometimes musical instruments to add warmth to the evenings. During these gatherings, Maria noticed patterns emerging. People spoke openly about their losses, whether it was the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or the collapse of a dream they'd worked hard for. Others shared stories of resilience, recounting moments when they found courage amid despair. A retired teacher named Mr. Jenkins talked about planting a garden after losing his wife, saying it helped him feel closer to her. A teenage girl named Lily admitted she had struggled with self-doubt until she realized how much her late grandmother had believed in her. Each story added layers to the collective tapestry of human experience, weaving together threads of sorrow and triumph. Maria herself participated in these conversations, sharing anecdotes about Daniel and the lessons he had taught her. She told them about his childhood fascination with nature, his tireless advocacy for environmental causes, and the journals he kept filled with dreams for a better world. As she spoke, she noticed listeners leaning in, captivated not only by Daniel's story but also by the passion behind her words. It occurred to her that talking about him wasn't just keeping his memory alive. It was inspiring others to think differently about their own lives. One evening, during a particularly lively gathering, someone suggested starting a community initiative inspired by Daniel's work. "We've all been moved by this tree and what it represents," said Tom, a local carpenter who had attended several sessions. "Why don't we channel that energy into something tangible? Maybe organize tree planting events or workshops on sustainability?" The idea sparked immediate enthusiasm. Within days, a small group formed, dedicated to turning the vision into reality. Maria threw herself into the project wholeheartedly. She reached out to local schools, libraries, and businesses asking for support. Together, they planned monthly activities aimed at raising awareness about environmental conservation. Children painted posters featuring colorful forests and animals, while adults volunteered to clean up nearby parks and rivers. The first major event, a mass tree planting day, drew hundreds of participants, many of whom had never met Daniel but were eager to honor his spirit by contributing to a greener future. Through it all, the sapling remained at the center of everything. It stood as a living testament to Daniel's ideals, a reminder that even the smallest actions could lead to profound change. Maria made sure to involve it in every aspect of the initiative. During meetings, she would place a chair near the tree, encouraging attendees to sit close and listen to its quiet wisdom. For special occasions, she tied ribbons around its branches, each one representing a promise made by someone to protect the earth. Over time, the tree became more than just a plant. It became a beacon of unity, drawing people together across generations and backgrounds. Despite the progress, Maria still grappled with moments of doubt. Late at night, when the house was silent and the weight of her loneliness pressed heavily against her chest, she wondered if she was interpreting the sapling's significance correctly. Was it really Daniel reaching out to her? Or was she projecting her desires onto an ordinary plant? These questions haunted her, especially on anniversaries or holidays when memories of Daniel felt sharper than ever. Yet, whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the tangible impact the sapling had already made. Strangers had become friends because of it. Families had planted trees in their yards, vowing to nurture them alongside their children. Even cynical skeptics who initially dismissed the idea of a miracle tree found themselves softened by its presence. If nothing else, the sapling had proven that hope could take root in the most unexpected places. And that was enough to keep Maria moving forward. As spring transitioned into summer, the tree continued to flourish. Its roots dug deeper into the soil, intertwining with those of the old oak nearby. Birds nested in its branches, their songs filling the air with melodies that sounded almost intentional. Maria often sat beneath it, closing her eyes and letting the sounds wash over her. In those moments, she didn't need answers. She didn't need proof that the sapling was Daniel. All she needed was the comfort of knowing that, in some way, he was still with her, guiding her, cheering her on, and watching over the world he had loved so dearly. As the seasons changed and years passed, the sapling that Maria had planted in her backyard grew into a magnificent tree. Its branches stretched high into the sky, casting a wide shadow over the yard where children now played and adults gathered to share laughter and stories. The tree had become a cornerstone of the community, a symbol of resilience, renewal, and unity. To Maria, it was more than just a plant. It was Daniel's living legacy, a testament to his unwavering love for nature and humanity. Every morning, Maria would step outside with a cup of tea and sit beneath the tree. She'd run her fingers over its rough bark, tracing the grooves as if they held secrets only she could decipher. Sometimes she swore she could feel a faint pulse beneath her fingertips, like the heartbeat of something ancient yet alive. Other times she'd close her eyes and listen to the rustle of leaves or the chirping of birds nesting among its branches. In those moments, she felt closer to Daniel than ever before, as if he were sitting beside her, sharing in the quiet joy of simply being present. The community initiative inspired by Daniel's work continued to thrive, growing beyond what anyone had imagined. What had started as small gatherings in Maria's backyard evolved into a regional movement known as Daniel's Roots. Schools adopted programs teaching students about sustainability and environmental stewardship. Local businesses pledged to reduce waste and support eco-friendly practices. Entire neighborhoods came together to transform vacant lots into lush green spaces, planting trees and flowers in memory of loved ones they had lost. Each new sapling planted carried a piece of Daniel's spirit, spreading hope far beyond the confines of Maria's garden. One of the most impactful projects under Daniel's Roots was the creation of a memorial forest on the outskirts of town. Donated land that had once been barren and neglected was transformed into a sprawling sanctuary filled with native trees, wildflowers, and walking trails. Families were invited to dedicate individual trees to their departed loved ones, creating a space where people could reflect, heal, and reconnect with nature. Maria played an active role in designing the forest, ensuring it reflected Daniel's vision of harmony between humans and the earth. On the day of its grand opening, hundreds of people attended the ceremony, many leaving handwritten notes tied to branches or placing mementos at the base of dedicated trees. For Maria, the memorial forest was especially meaningful. She often visited it alone, walking along the winding paths, until she reached a particular oak tree she had personally chosen to honor Daniel. Beneath its sprawling canopy, she placed a small plaque engraved with his name and a quote from one of his journals. "The earth is our home, and we must care for it as we would care for ourselves." Standing there, surrounded by the sights and sounds of life thriving around her, Maria felt a profound sense of peace. It was as though Daniel's presence lingered in every leaf, every blade of grass, and every breath of fresh air. Though the tree in her backyard remained her favorite spot, Maria began spending more time outdoors, engaging with others who shared her passion for conservation. She gave talks at schools, inspiring young minds with stories of Daniel's courage and determination. She led workshops on gardening and composting, showing people practical ways to make a difference in their daily lives. And whenever someone asked how she managed to stay so positive despite her loss, she simply smiled and said, "Because I know he's still here. With me, with all of us." Over time, Maria noticed subtle changes not only in herself but also in the people around her. Neighbors who had once seemed distant now greeted her warmly, stopping to chat about their latest gardening projects or asking for advice on sustainable living. Children who used to spend hours glued to screens now spent afternoons climbing trees and exploring the outdoors. Even skeptics who had initially dismissed the idea of environmental activism found themselves drawn to the movement, realizing that protecting the planet wasn't just about saving resources. It was about preserving memories, fostering connections, and leaving behind a better world for future generations. Despite these successes, Maria never forgot the weight of her grief. There were still nights when loneliness crept in, reminding her of the void Daniel's absence had left in her life. But instead of letting sadness consume her, she channeled it into action. Every tear shed became water for the soil. Every pang of longing fueled her determination to keep going. She understood now that grief wasn't something you got over. It was something you carried with you, learning to live alongside it rather than push it away. On the 5th anniversary of Daniel's passing, Maria organized a special gathering in the memorial forest. Hundreds of people attended, including old friends, new acquaintances, and even strangers who had heard about Daniel's story and wanted to pay their respects. As the sun set behind the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maria stood before the crowd and spoke from the heart. 5 years ago, I lost my son, she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. But today, I stand here knowing that he hasn't truly left us. He lives on in this forest, in the trees we've planted, and in the hearts of everyone touched by his dream. Daniel taught me and all of us that life is precious, that nature heals, and that love endures. So let's continue honoring him by caring for each other and for the world we share. Her words were met with applause, followed by a moment of silence as attendees lit candles and placed them at the base of the trees. Fireflies danced through the air, their soft glow adding magic to the evening. Maria stayed long after most people had left, sitting quietly beneath Daniel's oak tree. As the stars emerged overhead, she whispered softly, "Thank you, my boy, for everything." In the years that followed, Maria's efforts earned widespread recognition. Articles were written about her story, highlighting the power of resilience and community. Awards were presented to her on behalf of Daniel's roots, celebrating its impact on both local and global scales. Yet none of these accolades mattered as much to Maria as the simple act of nurturing life. Whether it was tending to her backyard tree, planting seedlings with school children, or watching the memorial forest flourish. Looking back, Maria realized that losing Daniel had been the hardest thing she'd ever endured, but it had also led her to discover strength she didn't know she possessed. Through the sapling, she had found purpose, connection, and a renewed appreciation for the beauty of existence. Though Daniel was no longer physically present, his spirit lived on, not just in the trees but in the countless lives he had touched through his mother's unwavering dedication. And so Maria continued forward, guided by the belief that love transcends death and that hope can take root even in the darkest soil. Every time she touched the bark of the towering tree in her yard or walked through the memorial forest, she could swear she felt Daniel smiling back at her, a reminder that, while endings are inevitable, legacies endure forever.